Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. In the spirit of the trees, in the spirit of living nature, of which we are an integral part, with deep gratitude to all of our ancestors who have brought us to the present moment. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising, session number 535. We are concluding today a 4-day program on regenerative health and how we can move from burnout to buoyancy in our lives by paying attention to the ways that we just very naturally, just by putting our fingers on different parts of our body, just different postures and different orientations of being, how we can empower ourselves and empower not only our bodies, but our emotions, our psyches, our mental attitudes, to regenerate the kind of vitality that all of us are born with, but we somehow lose along the way given the stresses of our existence. One of the points that I wanted to make as we bring this particular program to a close is that this work, 15, 20 years ago was a novelty. I can still remember back in the 1970s when President Nixon went to China, and the Chinese showed him acupuncture. And there was a huge scandal in the American Medical Association and among American doctors, and lots of television programs saying that that's not possible. Just putting your fingers on a certain part of the body does not really do anything, that this is basically Chinese superstition. So you can think just how far we've come to just understanding not only the importance of integral medicine and drawing upon different ways of understanding the body and understanding the disease, but different ways of curing the ailments that beset us over the last 40, 50 years. But as we go into this next period of human history, where chaos now is beginning to develop exponentially, those aspects of our health that were intellectual curiosities decades ago are now becoming crucial, in fact, imperatives for our well-being. Because one of the laws of nature is that the more chaos you have in the external world, the more coherent you have to be in your internal world in order to, at a minimum, maintain equilibrium. So that as we hear, for example, just in Pakistan over the last few days, 1/6 of the landmass of Pakistan is underwater due to climate change. Just think of the stresses of those thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people that have had to cope with a deluge due to the melting glaciers of the Himalaya as the climate warms, and because of the intensification of weather. Some places like in North America where I am, we're under the scourge of drought. Well, in Pakistan, they've had 500% more rain for their monsoon. And so all around the world, there's ecological turbulence that we're all confronted with, and we don't think about it very often, except when it's in the news and we become uncomfortable, but it's causing stress on our underlying systems. And that's why we've been bringing to our collective attention on many of the broadcasts of Humanity Rising that anxieties are increasing, depressions, drug addiction, domestic abuse, alcoholism, crime, all kinds of maladies, I would say, of the psyche and spirit are escalating. Suicides among young people. We talked yesterday about PTSD and the extraordinary number of people worldwide that are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Not only people who've gone to war, but Holocaust survivors. The whole phenomenon of transgenerational trauma is a reality for each and every one of us. So when we bring these programs like Regenerative Health, we're not doing it as a curiosity. We're doing it because we know that all of us need to pay very close attention to the ways that we can build up our internal coherence so that we can navigate successfully through the escalating chaos that is now being multiplied, not only in terms of climate, but with the war in Ukraine. There's a destabilization of the entire global infrastructure as our political economies and our financial markets begin to adjust to the globalization of conflict. And each of us as individuals have to kind of take this in. I can't tell you how many people over the last 6 months have said to me, I don't even watch the news anymore because I can't bear it. Well, just think about that for a moment, that you can't bear even to watch the news because it's stressing you out so much. So if humanity is to rise, if we are to individually and collectively turn this thing around, much less cope with the rising turbulence, we got to take seriously the imperative of certain practices. And the beauty of what we've seen this week is that these practices are extremely simple. You don't have to buy anything. You just have to learn the way your body works and then begin a practice like we're doing with the breathing. Nothing is more simple than breathing. We take 25,000 breaths a day. We know that for the last several centuries, as modernization and the stresses of industrialization and global capitalism have made our situation more competitive and more coercive, that people are just breathing faster. They're more anxious. They're more stressed. And people are breathing more and more out of their mouths rather than their nose. And they're not thinking about it very much. But then they begin to have all kinds of diseases that aren't caused by anything other than the fact that they're not breathing appropriately. So just simply becoming conscious of our breath is a foundational step in developing the coherence that we need. Because if we slow our breath down every day in an intentional way, we probably do as much to generate health as any of the pills that we're taking. Think of all the money we've spent on our supplements and our pills and all the stuff that we do to try to make ourselves healthy. And we run around and exercise, and we run around and eat organic and non-GMO, all of which are important. And yet we're breathing. It's compromising what we're seeking to achieve. So when we think about regenerative health and we think about what we can do day by day, these are important. And this is one reason why we have this program this week, why we have a course in October, and even the development of a master's program on regenerative health that we'll be talking about over the next weeks and months. And I wanted to just have this kind of introduction as we close out our 4-day program, because I just want to emphasize, sort of from me, who brought in the coherence breathing, that I consider this, as I've said on a number of occasions, a national security issue. This is something that we all need to take very seriously. And I guarantee you, because I've seen it in my own life, that if we can engage in just simple coherence breathing that we now know through science optimizes not only all of our body processes, but calms the emotions, increases emotional intelligence, makes us think better, enables us to make decisions more astutely. That's what we want to bring to you. And that's going to become now part of our daily practice on Humanity Rising. And it's deepening that practice with which we started around heart coherence, because if you breathe coherently, your heart settles into itself and very naturally creates coherence with the brain and with the larger ecosystem that comprises our bodily physiology. So I want to turn now to our breathing. And again, it's a very simple breath. It's just around inhaling. When you hear the first bell, inhaling for 5.5 seconds. Then when you hear the second bell, just begin to exhale. And the slower you breathe in and the slower you breathe out, the easier it is. And if for whatever sets of reasons that's too long, no worries. The key is conscious, regulated, slow inhalations and slow exhalations. And if you do that every day, you'll be delightfully surprised at how better you feel. And you'll just notice that your body is just more in tune with itself and you're feeling more vital. And it makes it easier for you to interact with the external world with the abundance and compassion we all want. So that's the prolegomena, as it were, to our coherence breathing. So Georg, start the bells and let us just, if you can, close your eyes. And for the next 3 minutes, breathe. Don't you feel much better? Don't you feel calmer? Don't you feel more coherent? It's a wonderful practice. It's a wonderful practice. Just to breathe. Thank you all so much. Now it's my great pleasure, indeed privilege, to introduce my colleague and good friend, Stephanie Mines, neuroscientist and embryologist who knows the science of all these matters, and particularly in terms of Chinese medicine, which has been a mystery to most Westerners, but she brings a deep empathy around that practice and healing art, but with a scientific vigor that enables us to understand really the scientific language of mysticism and the healing arts. So Stephanie, thank you so much. We're privileged to have you with us on Humanity Rising, and I turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Jim. It's my honor really to weave together the approach to addressing this intersection of personal and collective trauma that is called burnout. So burnout, the very word, tells me, given my studies and my research into embryology, neuroscience, and Taoism, the hands-on applications I'm sharing with you have their roots in Taoism. And my colleague, Dr. Spring Chung, who was with us, and I share the feminine roots of Taoism. That meeting of embryology, neuroscience, and Taoism essentially is the Tara approach. And what we've done in these 4 days is weave together those ancient roots with the feminine perspective on burnout that from that orientation tells us that it is an assault on the heart, the fire element. And as I shared with you, my esteemed ancestor, Mary Eno Burmeister, taught me just at the same time that I was in my graduate program in neuroscience that no one actually has a heart attack. They have a kidney attack, which means that the water element, the kidney, the adrenal system is bearing the brunt of overload, which then gets passed to the pericardium and then gets passed to the heart. So the heart is the last receptor of an accumulation of precursors. And the Tara approach is dedicated to unraveling back to those original precursors with a feminine orientation, with the feminine wisdom about burnout, not only to address the epidemic of burnout that is escalating and will continue to escalate. We can do that. We do it. We antidote it. But there's much more to it than that. When you follow this unraveling process, what it leads to is the beginning of a new era, the era of peace, the era of innovation, the era of what I call original brilliance. That is what is reclaimed through the process that I have been sharing with you. That is my personal journey. I'm talking about my lived experience. I am speaking very practically, and I am speaking from the standpoint of one who lives precisely what it is that I share with you. So today, we are going to be diving into that unraveling process deeply with the support of my colleague, Dr. Nalini Yadav. But I want to begin with a very simple practice. This is a basic practice that informs everything that you've been learning. And it's so accessible. I share it with people of all ages, little ones into elders. And it's a practice you can use in combination with coherent breathing. So this is a practice that my teacher, Mary Eno Burmeister, launches her programs with. And it is a practice of holding the fingers. So each of the fingers held in the way that this chart demonstrates, embraced, literally wrapped in a cocoon formed by the opposite hand. The simple practice of holding each of the fingers allows you to tonify your entire organism, every aspect of your organism. And I will be telling you about the role of each finger in generating total regeneration. This simple practice that can be done in combination with your meditation, in combination with coherent breathing, which we will experience together today, can completely regenerate every aspect of your being. So when you wrap your fingers, as shown in this chart, around the thumb, you are regenerating your digestive system. People respond to burnout to what my colleague Bruce McEwen calls allostatic load. Bruce McEwen wrote a book called The End of Stress as We Know It in 2002. And he talked about how when allostasis, or the innate symmetry of the nervous system, is breached, you have what he calls allostatic load. Everyone has their own version of allostatic load. And for some people, that is a complete breakdown of digestive function. So by wrapping the thumb gently and lovingly in the palm of the opposite hand with the fingers embracing the thumb, you regenerate the digestive system, your earth element. All of the elements of the natural world live in you. That is the essence of Taoism. So as you hold the thumb, you may begin to feel a pulsation rising into the palm of your hand. You may begin to feel an ease in your digestive system. This is also associated with the release of worry. So we become very anxious in the throes of catastrophe. Of course we do. But we transcend that common response by easing into our transformative selves by holding the thumb. You release the water element by doing the same thing with your index finger. This is the ultimate finger of resilience and buoyancy. This simple practice of holding the index finger talks directly to your kidney adrenal system, the water element. So when you hold the index finger on either side, you are regenerating, filling up the well of Jing, the well of your total energy reserves. We have very few practices in the West that fill the well of reserves. Mostly we just empty that well. By holding the index finger, you fill the well of energetic reserves. Simultaneously, you release your fear. Fear is associated with that depletion, that attack on the adrenal system. Panic, fear, shock hits the adrenal system first. And if that shock and panic is repeated in your life story, the brunt of that depletes completely your reserves. And that's when the transfer happens to the pericardium, your heart protector. Each one of us has their own story of exposures. The rate and consistency of those exposures equals your vulnerability. That's what we unpack by forming our personal exposome and thereby creating a respite niche that brings us out of that intergenerational inheritance that we have the birthright to transform. The middle finger, wrapping it lovingly, whether it's the right or the left, tonifies, regenerates your intelligence. This is your wood element. This middle finger, the kids laugh so much when I talk about the middle finger. They just get such a kick out of that. That actually regenerates your brain. So the middle finger, the wood element, speaks directly to the relationship between your heart and your brain. Please don't forget the brain, your heart, your kidney, adrenal system, they all form out of the same tissue. So coherence, congruence, is the reunification of the unity of yourself. The middle finger supports memory, focus, and also your spine, your structure, all by holding the middle finger. The ring finger, wrapped lovingly, placed gently in the palm of the opposite hand, tonifies, regenerates your respiration, alleviates the weight of grief that leads to despair, that is an accumulation of intergenerational patterns of loss. The grieving that is a natural response to all we are losing every day: species, plant life, ecosystems, family members. Those losses accumulate, and unless they are alleviated, they lead to burnout. The lungs and the heart are intimate twins. They develop alongside one another. When you hold the ring finger in this loving way, you lessen that burden of grief and you bring forth your capacity to build community, to connect with others. You know that you are not alone in your loss. The little finger, when you embrace that little finger and hold it warmly and lovingly in the palm of the opposite hand, which is probably quite warm by now, you are speaking softly, whispering to the fire element, your heart, and also your small intestine meridian, your capacity to sort all of this out. That focus and that prioritizing is one of the keys to coming out of burnout. In my experience, it's one of the first things that happens as I emerge from my own experience of burnout, is I begin to know what my priorities are. When you do that, you lessen the burden on your heart. And my teacher, Mary Eno Burmeister, said, this takes off the burden of over-efforting, of what she called pretense, of trying too hard. And we see this everywhere, at least I do in the West, the false smile, the enormous effort that people put into saying everything will be all right in the face of daily disaster. You know, there's a middle ground here, and that is being honest about the disasters and the catastrophes and embracing them just as we embrace the little finger, knowing they are a portal to transformation through our awakening. That is also the intersection of personal and collective trauma transformed into personal and collective awakening. Little finger. The center of the palm of the hand and the back of the hand, when you hold those two together, and you may do that in this way, simply by touching them, but that also happens in the palm inju, this mudra, prayer mudra. That awakens an aspect of your fire element that is spoken of most eloquently in this system that I convey to you, called primordial fire. It's all about the primordial fire. The primordial fire is your original brilliance. So the transformation of worry, fear, anger, grief, and pretense results in the emergence of original brilliance, primordial fire. So let's expand the coherent breathing even further, deepen your ability to access your original brilliance by spending a little more time holding these fingers and the center of the palm of the hand in palm inju, or by holding the center and the back of the hand. And accompany that with the coherent breathing. I want to say again, as Jim indicated, please feel free to adjust the coherent breathing according to your unique attributes, your respiratory system, your tolerance. There are many ways to find your own personal coherent breathing. And the Tara approach is really about finding your own personal path to transformation, to original brilliance. So in some systems, for instance, that also have research behind them, when the exhalation is twice as long as the inhalation, that calms the polyvagal system. So play with that, play with the different options that are available to you. I have a history of asthma. I have some anomalies in my respiratory system. So adjusting the breathing so that I deepen my relaxation rather than trying to follow a recipe is something I encourage you to do. So explore that for the next 3 minutes. We can take down the slide and Georg will play the bells for us once again so that we can release the fingers. If you've already released one hand, release the other this time. And we'll have 3 minutes of practice. Thank you. Georg, if you have access.
Yes, we'll start the bells now.
Thank you so much, Georg. please notice the shifts in your own being. I had an incredible experience while we were doing that. As something I actually have been longing for, which is that I felt like I could see the people I'm speaking to out there in the virtual world. I actually saw you, and that was such a joy to my being. It feels difficult and challenging to offer such intimate and personal details about myself, but also a practice that is part of my daily life, and not be able to see the people receiving it. So I am grateful. I feel like I saw your faces, and I certainly hope that that will manifest even further as you attend the Ubiquity course and the Tara programs that convey to you these accessible, ageless resources, not only for healing from trauma, not only for meeting the excruciating intersection of personal and collective breakthrough, but in manifesting your original brilliance, manifesting your unique contribution at this time. That is the portal, that is the threshold that we stand upon together, personally and collectively. And this practice of releasing worry, fear, anger, grief, and pretense, I've taught to the veterans that Cindy described yesterday, the suffering in the families of our veterans, and to their children in my book, New Frontiers in Sensory Integration. That is a practice the children just love, despite the jokes about the anger and the middle finger. They love learning to release their fingers and then sharing that with their friends and family members, reminding them that it is possible to transform those instinctual responses into their higher manifestation. So there is another aspect of the Tara approach that accompanies this exquisite bioelectrical transformative possibilities that is right in our hands. And that is this unraveling that I've spoken to many times. How do we extract from the web of unconscious memory systems stored in the fascia that is being evoked through these practices? How do we unravel from that the exposome, the burdens, not for the purpose of re-victimizing ourselves, which is a waste of time, but for the purpose of understanding? Just as I spoke to the discovery, and I did this very intimately in the after chat yesterday. It was really beautiful for me to share so transparently the process I went through of discovering the combat shock that my father brought home and how that attached to an earlier head injury that he had. The awareness and the validation of that, along with other similar experiences of understanding, really allowed me to break through the traumatic repetition that I had inherited. And V speaks to this so beautifully in her book, The Apology, of how understanding, bringing in that neocortical awareness of your journey is actually the route to becoming who you truly are, showing up as who you truly are. And V, of course, epitomizes that. She chose a new name to symbolize the breakthrough that came for her as a result of the research that she did. And she talks about the year that it took her to do that research into herself that resulted in the book, The Apology. I highly recommend it. So That unraveling process is something I call the rediscovery journey. And I'm going to share that with you now. And Nalini, who is an advanced Tara approach student and a dear friend, my students do become part of a cohort, a global cohort of people who are committed to this transformational possibility. And Nalini, since she started working on her doctoral dissertation, and I have been on parallel paths, accompanying one another, and she has graciously agreed to allow her own life story to be a demonstration of that unraveling process. So that unraveling process I call the rediscovery journey. And Nalini, if you'll share that slide, these are the components of the rediscovery journey. And it is a unification process that brings together the neocortical aspect of understanding and awareness that I identify as the witness aspect of self, and the limbic aspect of self, the aspect of self that is epitomized in our nurturing capacity, in our capacity to steward. So this manifests in parenthood, but it manifests in many ways. It manifests in our love of the earth, in our compassion for others. So I call this the parent aspect of self. Everyone has a parent aspect of self, whether you are actually a parent or not. So when we unify the witness aspect of self, neocortical self, with the limbic self in the service of the wounded aspect of self, which we unravel to its origins, we create a unification that allows shuttered windows of developmental opportunity that linger even into old age unless they are opened. We open the shuttered windows of opportunity. So from a neuroscience and embryological standpoint, the truth is that windows of opportunity in terms of development at every level occur in very specific timeframes. However, when those windows of opportunity do not open in their designated time frame, they do not close finally. They do not forego the opportunity of reopening. In the rediscovery journey, we do that wonderful task of opening partially shuttered windows of opportunity. And my friends, this is simple. It needs some guidance. It needs some structure. But I have done my best to make that guidance and structure accessible and available. And thanks to the generosity of Nalini, I'm going to demonstrate that for you now. So Nalini, thank you so much for allowing your vulnerability and your generosity to take front and center, pushing aside any reluctance or embarrassment. I feel that is the act of bodhisattva. When we come forward and share our stories with others, we are releasing all the other people who are mirrored by our stories. And as we saw with Cindy Collins-Clark yesterday, and many of us know personally, the stories that aren't told. I know I come from a family where painful stories are avoided. People don't talk about their suffering. my dear brother who just died, refused to speak to his suffering. He felt it would be a burden on other people. That is a common misunderstanding. Children especially are alleviated when we find the appropriate way to tell them the truth. Of course, it has to be in language that is geared to their development, which is something I encourage and teach how to shape that language. But if we don't speak about what is burdening us, children and others, but children especially, will feel that somehow they are responsible for that. They will feel it. That is one of the teachings of the Tara approach, is the incredible sensory perception of little ones, even babies in utero, as we evolve. So we're going to dive deep into that. And Nalini has volunteered to be the subject. And I just want to thank you, and please share your feelings about doing this, and why is it that you were so willing to be available?
Gosh, because I know the power of it, and I know how helpful it is. The few times that I've gone through this process with either you or Tristan, have really been able to take all of the rest of the self-care and the practitioners, that I've worked with the Tara approach. It's taken all of that work and kind of, it's almost like it put it into a book, it bound it. And
wow.
Then it was there and it was together, and it made it all whole, and kind of brought it all that work together in a culmination. Does that mean everything's fixed? No. But it brings all that together, and every time I've done a rediscovery, it's moved me forward in great ways. And I think it's something that a lot of people would shy away from, because it does take a lot of vulnerability to be able to do, especially in a forum like this, but there's quite a few people watching. But again, it's that active self-care in a way that I know can help other people. So I'm honored to be able to do this with you here today, Stephanie, with everybody.
Thank you. And it is a great benefit for Nalini to be the subject of this process. She has experienced it before, so that will allow us to move through it much more swiftly than it would normally take. She understands the purpose of doing it in this format. So normally this would take much longer than it will here, and it will be more structured. We're going to move through it quickly. And so some of the structures are going to be made extremely efficient. So please bear that in mind as we proceed. So let's just start, Nalini, with you sharing either anything that you're feeling in your body right now. It's very important that everyone understand that this is a somatic and not an intellectual process, just as the hands-on applications are oriented to connective tissue conductivity of transformational possibility, not intellectual change. It's somatic change that we're aiming for. This is a practical and somatic oriented approach. So what you're feeling right now, or what you're feeling somatically about any event in your life that is perhaps imminent or has just occurred, that can be our starting point. So select from that series of options and just tell me a little about your feeling state right now.
Well, other than the nervousness and anxiety, my lower back has been a big problem the last 2 years consistently. And beginning to think there's some connection with my fear of being completely unprepared for when my parents leave this earth. And it's something that I have been avoiding even dealing with thinking about.
So as you say that, Nalini, what do you feel in your lower back?
Tightness.
Uh-huh. And can you be just a little more specific about where that tightness is in your lower back?
It's close to L4, L5 in my
Mhm.
lower back. And then it starts in the center of where the vertebrae are, and it spreads out towards my hips.
Uh-huh.
The hips.
Mhm. So as you bring your awareness into those lumbar vertebra in your lower back, L4 and L5, the lumbar structure, just allow yourself to deepen the sensory awareness. Now, I know this is probably going to be uncomfortable initially, that because there is tightness there, if you drop more into it, the experience might be that you feel the tightness more. And it's a difficult concept, but it is true that when you do expand that discomfort, sometimes, most of the time, it increases the awareness of what is actually behind it. So if you could bring your breath, bring your awareness into that tightness, and let me know if when you do that, and this is going to take some real focus on your part, when you do that, when you become more connected to the tightness in your lumbar vertebra, do you have a sense of being a different size? And feel free to say no, you feel the same size you are, but just drop into that sensation and see if you feel yourself to be a different size or a different shape.
Size may be a little smaller. Definitely a different shape.
Oh, and so staying there with that awareness, can you describe that different shape?
It's like a ball with all of these little wiggly appendages.
Uh-huh. And about what is the size of that ball?
Maybe the size of like a volleyball or a basketball.
Okay. So you feel yourself to be about the size of a volleyball with many appendages. Do you have a sense of how many appendages?
There's so many. They go out in every direction.
Beautiful. And again, playing with this is a bit of an imaginary journey. But imagination, you know, is a very important part of our intelligence. As you experience this volleyball size of your structure with all these appendages going in so many directions, do you have a sense of there being anything around you?
The whole universe around me, but everything's out of reach.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So there's a whole universe around you, but everything is out of reach. So I'd like to invite you, just playing with this incredible somatic experience of yourself as a volleyball with all these appendages and a whole universe around you, but everything out of reach. Just staying with that, I'd like you to access simultaneously the part of your consciousness that I call a witness. So that is the part of consciousness. Everyone has this aspect to varying degrees. And I'm going to ask you to tell me the degree to which you have it. And that is the aspect of consciousness that sees deeply, but doesn't evaluate, doesn't form conclusions, just sees what's there, but much more profoundly than our daily lives, pierces the superficial reality to the deepest reality. Do you have such an aspect available to you right now?
Yes.
Oh, great. Great. So bring that aspect of your consciousness, the witness, to this volleyball with all the appendages, so many appendages, and an entire universe around you out of reach. And what does that volleyball size Nalini self need? What does the volleyball need? Take your time.
Not all the appendages need to reach outward.
So some of those appendages could rest.
They could rest. They could take care of the other appendages.
So is the witness part of you identifying that the need is to be less reaching out in all directions and to be more organized, more prioritized, perhaps, more allowing some appendages to rest, allowing some appendages to just take care of the volleyball?
Yes. Yeah. That some of them just needs to be focused and differentiated. They don't all have to be reaching out.
Wow. So some of those appendages actually need to differentiate.
Mm-hmm.
They need to not be engaged in this massive outreach. Go ahead.
The witness is seeing that the reason why nothing's happening and there's no movement is because they're all reaching in different directions. So I can't move. I'm stuck. Because
you're stuck in the overactivity.
Yes, and then I'm reaching every different direction. When you reach every different direction with the same effort, you're not going to move.
So there's a kind of, and please disregard this word if it doesn't feel useful. There's a kind of hyperactivity that's leading to no activity.
Yes, and over efforting without results.
Thank you. Beautiful witnessing. And I'm wondering if that witness aspect of yourself that has stepped forward here so wonderfully can see even deeper to the need that motivates that hyperactivity. What is the need, the initiation, the ignition of that hyperactivity? And don't feel like you have to answer. Just let the witness do what the witness does.
Fear of being unprepared.
Fear, there is a fear of being unprepared. So what is the need from the witness's perception? The witness just sees what is. From the witness perception, what is the need behind the fear of being unprepared?
Support.
the volleyball with all the appendages reaching in so many directions that it's going nowhere, needs support.
Stability,
Stability,
support, grounding.
grounding, support, and stability. And can the witness see, and again, just let the witness do what the witness does by perception, so don't feel like you have to generate an answer. What would be the likeliest source of that grounding, stability, and support that this hyperactive volleyball needs? Where would that support come from to best serve this volleyball?
Nature, earth.
The earth. Beautiful, the earth. Beautiful. Well done. So now, Nalini, I'm going to invite you simultaneously. So we're holding all these aspects of self in presence. And there's another aspect of self that I am going to inquire into for you. I want you to find the nurturing aspect of yourself, the part of you, the limbic aspect of you, the mammalian aspect of you that sees this hyperactive being with all these frantic, hyperactive appendages going nowhere, reaching, trying to do everything at once because of this lack of support, this fear of being unprepared, this terror, you might say, of what might. Let that nurturing part of self interact with that, the part of your consciousness that is stewarding, other-directed, caring, compassionate.
The mother, the mother in me.
Now tell us how the mother interacts with this situation, Nalini. How the mother in you interacts with this situation.
It just reminds me that I have been prepared for this. That every bit of preparation is already in me. And I don't need to keep reaching outward.
And how do you experience that in your body, Nalini?
Oh, there's a lovely warmth on my back.
And what is happening in terms of that tightness that you felt in the lumbar vertebra?
It's relaxing. That warmth is radiating.
So, Nalini, that lumbar area generally is sacred site number 23, the site known as destiny. I'm going to recommend that you put your palm on that sacred site and then the other palm on sacred site number 14, which is right in front of it, on one side and then on the other. taking your time in your own rhythm. Sacred site number 23, the key to the water element, the adrenal system. Sacred site number 14, known as the sustainer, the grounding force that allows energy to descend fully into the body. So by holding these two sites, you're supporting the ascending yang rhythm of destiny with the descending yin energy of support. And see how that interfaces with the spreading warmth, alleviating the tightness, the fear of being unprepared, which is a false belief that has now been rectified in your tissue, in your fascia, in your structure. That feeling of having to do everything because you don't have the support you need is likely, given the shape that you described, very old, from the time that you were an egg. And we're not blaming anyone or saying anybody did anything wrong in not providing that support for you. We're simply providing that support now, in the present moment, allowing connective tissue to conduct that new information, that current information, this presence through your connective tissue up into your brain, into your occiput, into your brainstem, into the basal ganglia, to alleviate the tension in your primitive brain that was from the past, and stepping into the present, claiming the truth of now. I see a lot in your face. I see a lot in your structure, but please share what you're experiencing.
Felt like a big unburdening. There's still uncertainty, but it's not so scary.
Thank you. Thank you for your honesty. And thank you, Nalini. I really felt you and I were alone together, deeply connected in this process. And I know that we're on Humanity Rising, and many people, some of whom I saw a few moments ago, are observing. But I know from my witnessing of you, the completely genuine way that you brought forward and inhabited. And I want to recognize that and support you in sustaining this differentiation between the past and the present.
Thank you. And thank you all. On the one hand, yes, Stephanie, it was definitely like all the treatments you and I have done together, but there was something more. There was more energy around.
Mm.
I could feel all of you.
Mm. Mm.
Thank you all.
So that is a bird's eye view of the rediscovery journey. A sense of how we unravel and differentiate the past from the present and step into the original brilliance of who we truly are. And of course, this is the product of years that Nalini has been involved in her own evolution mentoring her own evolution, but it is also a completely standalone, unique experience that shows you the potential. So do we need to understand what the volleyball with all the appendages represents? I mean, I can bring up images that we have of an egg, and it looks exactly like that. So do we have to talk about that? I would to my students, but it's not really necessary. We are working with the somatic sensory memory that has retained everything that we have experienced, and that is in the mother matrix, which is our connective tissue. So I'd like to open this up now to Jim as the on-site observer and commentator, and invite his questions. Sorry, I have not been looking at the chat, but I will, just to see how others are responding. This is a bird's eye view of a process that I have codified and simplified after many years of research and study to make it accessible. I do the same process with children in play. It is a process that I am thrilled to deliver so that all of us can step into original brilliance.
Thank you so much, Stephanie and Nalini. I think maybe the little bit more of the energy you were feeling today is that you've probably got a couple thousand people at a minimum all rooting for you. So the collective healing is a very powerful tool that is scientifically proven to have a real effect. When two or three are gathered together in my name, saith the Lord, great things can happen. And so you've been held by a lot of people in diverse nooks and crannies of the globe over the last 30 minutes or so. So I just want to thank everybody for being so present with Nalini, and Nalini for your courage. My goodness gracious, just to be able to hold your equilibrium while you're on a public stage takes a certain level of coherence, which you demonstrated very elegantly. So I just want to acknowledge you and thank you for that. And and I was just thinking, Stephanie, as we bring this to a close, whether you could take a few minutes just to go into a little bit more detail of what you're going to cover in your course, because you've given us sort of some headlines, as it were, in some very short pointers. Like I've known a lot about acupuncture and so forth, but I didn't know that just by holding your fingers like this, you have a real effect on your brain and your grief and your other aspects of your body. So I'm very energized about your course. So just tell us a little bit more about what you have in mind over the course. It'll be a micro course, everyone. So it'll be 4 90-minute to 2-hour sessions over 4 weeks, beginning, I believe it is on October 6th.
October 5th.
October 5th. So just tell us a little bit more about what you're going to cover so people know. And I'll put the link to the course in the chat.
So every course that I teach begins by establishing relationship. There is no real personal or collective transformation, I believe, without establishing relationship. So we will build our personal relationship, create a cohort, a healing cohort in the class, and get a true sense of everyone who is there so that we can support one another. As Nalini described, the value of support in terms of evolution is critical. So building community, such as what you've been doing through Humanity Rising and what you did in Chartres that I was so grateful to be part of, is essential in transformational healing. So we'll build community, and then we will deepen the fundamentals that you have tasted in these 4 days, the fundamentals of the energy medicine system. The Jinshin Tara is the name of it, that I developed as a result of my studies with Mary Eno Burmeister. And this Jinshin system, which is touch, is thought by some to be the mother of acupuncture, literally the feminine origin of acupuncture. So acupuncture would be considered more yang because of the needling, but the subtle touch, the gentle touch that evokes the connective tissue memory of one's entire history is what Jinshin is. And what I discovered in my research was the correlation between these sites on the body and embryogenesis. So we will learn about that in the course. And I have a short video that if we have time, I'll show today that demonstrates how these sites on the body, and this map is quite a simple map. The simplicity is deceptive, and people sometimes poo-poo the simplicity. The simplicity is the profundity of this system. These sites ignite every embryological sequence that we experience as we develop, so that we totally regenerate, open those shuttered windows of development somatically. So we will learn that map and how to access it, and then we will provide opportunities for every participant in the class to unravel and identify their own exposome. So exposome is a word I have adapted from molecular biology, and it is used in more global contexts. I have made it personal. And the exposome is a structure by which we can track our personal exposures and then create what I call a respite niche, which is a personalized respite structure that allows you to be immune to burnout. You have to have the discipline of using your respite niche. That's your responsibility. But how to construct your respite niche and why your respite niche is unique to you, that is the topic of the class, and the participants will support one another in building a respite niche for themselves. And my guess is, because this is what happens, people who join that course will likely be establishing relationships that will continue long beyond the course. And for those people who are committed to regenerative health, if they really have a passion for focusing their original brilliance on the health crisis that we're in, and everybody knows we're in a health crisis, everybody who has sought healthcare resources, I'm seeking them now for my mom, I was seeking them for my brother. We all know the system is shredded, falling apart at the seams. And of course, it hits the neediest the hardest, but everybody is affected, except I guess millionaires. They have their special inroads, but the majority of people are unable to access the healthcare they desperately need. We will be creating a regenerative revolution of embodied healthcare through these practices.
Extraordinary. And you say you had a video, Stephanie, you wanted to play?
Yes, I have a couple videos that I want to play. I think there's still time for them.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes left. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Well, I wanted to share with everyone the demonstration I created of how this map of the sacred sites unleashes our access to these shuttered windows of opportunity through contact. So this video demonstrates the embryogenesis of the sacred sites. Would you show that video, my dear friend Nalini? The sacred sites of the body are landmark PowerPoints for the exquisite folding and unfolding dance of human incarnation, designed as descending down the front of the body and ascending up the back cycles of embodiment from formlessness into form in the human process of inhabiting, accepting, and enlivening life in the body. The folding and unfolding cycle repeats eternally through the ages and is stored in our connective tissue and cellularly, and reports through pulse reading. This reflects the interaction of parasympathetic and sympathetic responses to our experiences, resulting in the ultimate resilience when all the sites are fully alive, fully turned on, and fully activated to integrate according to each individual's path. Experience the beauty of folding and unfolding in your life through the sacred sites of the body. So in the video, I'm actually passing my hands over all of the sacred sites as I am replicating the folding and unfolding. Another way to speak of that is consolidating and differentiating process that is embryological development. And my proposition to everyone is that you don't stop being an embryo. You are still in that embryonic process, and the entire world, that is the collective interface, the entire world is in a process of embryological unfolding, which is the differentiation that is the crucial juncture for this time. The differentiation that Nalini demonstrated, differentiating the past from the present in her personal life, but the same is true in our collective life. So the program that I offer you through Ubiquity and through all the Tara Approach programs allows you to heighten your capacity to differentiate. And I wanted to conclude by showing a video of a flow. A flow is a combination of these sites. So by touching a combination of sites, you create a particular transformational outcome. And the mother flow, which I've abbreviated quite a bit in this video, because all these flows exist on more complex levels that we offer in treatment, but the self-care versions are equally effective. And it is self-care that I'm emphasizing in the course, and that I'm emphasizing generally now since the pandemic started. And this mother flow awakens that compassionate self that is the great mother, the earth mother, that Nalini found within herself, that we can all find within ourselves, to support each one of us and to provide collective support at this transformational threshold. So this is a flow called the 13 flow, which I offer to you in an abbreviated form as self-care. Would you show that video? We have within ourselves the nutritive capacity for buoyancy. From the moment of conception, this resilient nutrition is available to us. The Tara approach offers this simple application to regenerate the mother flow, the indigenous treasure of nutrition that formed the umbilical cord, the placenta, all of our organs, and very specifically the digestive system, the gut, the energetic nutrients for all of this formation was stimulated, evoked by you, the embryo. The embryo in you, the living experience of embryonic intelligence, which you never lose, which you don't outgrow, but which has been obfuscated by the patriarchal, colonial, and oppressive suppression of indigenous intelligence in each one of us. That can be lifted like a veil through these practices. I am delighted to share with you some simple steps you can follow to awaken the mother flow, the flow of innate nutritive buoyancy. So let's begin by placing one hand. I'm using my right fingertips. It can be any fingertips. It could be the left hand as well. Find what's comfortable for you. I'm placing my right fingertips generally in what is the center of the chest, also called the middle 13, using the map of the body. 13 is the mother site. The 13 sites are on the right and left sides between the third and fourth ribs, on the chest in the interstitial area, and the middle 13 is in the center of the chest. So placing whichever fingertips are comfortable there, bring the fingertips of the other hand to the center of the occiput. So right in the middle of the base of the skull. This site is called center 4, and like the 13s, it's bilateral. And the central position of site number 4, known as shamanic gateway. So the gateway of the vital memory, the Akashic records, you might say, that lives in your body, is stimulated, brought into an ascending vitality by placing your fingertips in the central 4 with the fingertips of the other hand in the central 13. Close your eyes and allow yourself to breathe harmoniously in whatever pacing is most comfortable for you. You can invite 5 breaths in and 5 breaths out. You could also extend the exhalation to double the inhalation. Allow whatever is comfortable for you according to your respiratory nature, and attune to the rhythms, the pulsations that may be arising into your fingertips from these sites. As they balance with each other, come into harmony with each other, move your hands to wrap around the biceps on both arms, bringing your arms into a comfortable position. And once again, allowing the breathing rhythm that you are the most comfortable with. It could be with the exhalation twice as long as the inhalation. It could be 5 breaths in, 5 breaths out. It could be, as the coherent breathing suggests, 5.5, 5.5 breaths in and 5.5 breaths out. And once again, you're allowing the pulsations in the fingertips that are wrapped around the biceps to come into harmony. And this can be sufficient to awaken the nutritive powers, the buoyancy of the mother flow. If you would like to ground this experience more deeply in the body, you can place the fingertips of the right hand on the pubic bone and the fingertips of the left hand on the coccyx, the tailbone. And that will deepen the somatic grounding available from the mother flow. But once again, allowing the pacing of the pulsations arising to harmonize with each other in the pubic bone and tailbone positions. Letting your breath assist you, whatever breathing feels like it's the most appropriate for you. And when that coherence is palpable, you can seal the practice with the palm inju or prayer inju, bringing the pads of all the fingers and the palms of the hands together at the heart level. And this intensifies, strengthens, and augments the alignment from this practice. Thank you for igniting your innate resilience. Apologies, Jim. You've now instructed me that it's not 5.5 breaths. I was confused about that from the beginning, so my apologies.
Yeah, 5.5 seconds. Yeah. But beautiful, beautiful, Stephanie. These are so simple and yet they're so profoundly effective. And I love it that your healing is coming from the precursor to traditional acupuncture, because that means you're going back to the origins, the original intuitive impulse that some probably group of women had in ancient China thousands and thousands of years ago. Well, if you just do this and put your other finger here.
Yeah, Spring and I talk about that all the time. And I do want to say the benefit, I love acupuncture also, but the benefit is you cannot make any mistakes with this system. In acupuncture, if you needle incorrectly, weird stuff happens. But in this system, there's no error possible. Yeah. All touch in the field will evoke the same developmental response.
Well, thank you so much. That brings us to a close, everyone. 4 days of regenerative health that you can do as simply as putting your fingers in a certain alignment to different parts of your body. We're going to be doing a deeper dive beginning the 5th of October for a 4-week program with Stephanie. I'll put the link in the chat box for those of you who are watching through Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube. Just go to ubiquityuniversity.org, and right there on our homepage, right at the top, is Stephanie's course. We consider this a very important course for your own well-being and your own self-vitalization in these turbulent times. And Nalini, I want to thank you for your steadfastness over the last 4 days. You've been exquisite and elegant and poised. I wish you all the best with your parents and with your healing. And we'll see Stephanie in a couple of weeks on the Ubiquity platform. So thank you so much. That brings us to a close for today. Next week, we're going to have a 5-day program convened by the Pachamama Alliance on the Amazon and what the native peoples there, in combination with major global NGOs dealing with Amazonian health and well-being, are doing to try to save the lungs of the planet. So much of what Stephanie has been talking about is about our breath, and the lungs of the planet are under duress as we are. And we're going to spend 5 days looking at how we can more deeply understand the importance of saving the Amazon. So that'll start next Monday here on Humanity Rising. You're all welcome to the after chat session. You'll see the link in the chat box that Stan just put in. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you all again, same time, same station here on Humanity Rising on Monday morning. Bye for now. Thanks so much, Stephanie, Nalini. This has been a brilliant, profound program. We're deeply grateful. Bye, everyone.